my generation's the problem. I'm on Medicare. I go to the doctor now, and it's sort of like a party. It's the social life of the people in the waiting room. They never discuss price. Nobody asks. No doctor mentions it. And a month later, I'll get a bill for some procedure that I have to copay $14 or something. There's no market incentive. And I rudely refuse to die. And people my age keep living longer. When Social Security was designed, most people didn't even live to age 65. It was meant for the minority who would live so long that they'd outrun their savings. And now it's this entitlement, as we call it, and it's just unsustainable. It's not complicated math, it's just arithmetic. There aren't enough young people working who are going to be able in the next 10, 20 years to pay for all of us old geezers' retirement, Social Security and Medicare.
And a big part of that is because the prices are trumped up, because you have a three system of payers, insurers, and then you have the individuals themselves. No one actually feels the hurt, so prices continue to rise, and then you have discounting on the back doors. How do you deal with that from a libertarian perspective of free markets? I know I've lived in Europe, and they have great systems. It's called regulations, and they regulate a lot of what this can be, and they have a single payer system. How would it look like from a less is more type perspective?
Well, just again to quibble with your assumptions, Canada and England and I think Norway have a single payer system, but Germany, Switzerland, many of the other countries don't. Many people get private insurance to supplement their, yes, we'll take care of you government care, but that care is maybe 10 years old. Governments don't innovate. The incentive, I mean, there's people in government are often just as smart as people in the private sector, but the difference is the incentives. In the private sector, if you aren't improving every second, some competitor cleans your clock and you go out of business. In government, if you make a change, you're in trouble. So maybe you can get a change with an act of Congress or an election in 4 years or 8 years, but it's very hard to innovate. So Europe has good medical systems, but they don't have the latest care. And I forgot your question as I was quibbling with it.
How we could fix that. So for instance, my wife's Swiss. We lived there. I needed health insurance. We signed up. It took 10 minutes. There were 3 different prices. You can have high, you can have medium, you can have low, essentially. And they are guaranteed regulations of these are the things they have to cover. There's not that fine print that says, oh shit, I just got pregnant and my wife's not covered, so I have a $200,000 medical bill.
So when Obamacare was coming, everybody talked about coverage, but shouldn't the goal be care?
Coverage, results, not even care, results.
Results, but a step back, care. And even in America, if you show up at the hospital, they don't turn you away. People get care. People worry about it. It's a source of a lot of anxiety. And the answer, we libertarians say, is a market, which means people pay for their own care. And obviously that's not going to happen here. People think that's an outrage. Nobody can afford it. Well, so let's break that down. How come people can't afford it? We can afford houses, clothing, movies, expensive restaurant. We can afford everything else because when there's a market, the prices come down. And that's happened in the tiny sliver of healthcare where there is a market. LASIK eye surgery and plastic surgery. You go to those doctors and the waiting rooms are beautiful. LASIK eye surgery prices have come down while the quality of the treatment has gone up. It's because there's a market. The doctors give out their cell phone numbers because they want to please the customer. In America, we have the worst of all worlds. We have government and private insurance companies paying $7 out of $8. So the customer is not you. The customer is either the government or an insurance company. And then you have to add all the bureaucracy. The insurance company has all that horrible paperwork because they figure some of us will try to cheat them. And they use the paperwork to try to prevent that. Medicare barely does that. And so people do cheat more, and that raises the cost. The only thing that holds costs down is when you're spending your own money and people care about it. What would happen to the poor people, people with chronic conditions? Well, I think if we had a system like that, Rich people would step up and take care of poor people. There would be charity hospitals. They might be religion based, but there used to be lots more of those before the welfare state came. How many people died during the Depression in America? How many people starved? Almost no one. Why? The country as a whole was much poorer then. Food was a higher percentage of people's incomes, but there were 18,000 mutual aid societies all over the country that helped people. And they were cliquish and racist. It was like Koreans helping Koreans and blacks helping blacks. But they would get together in a group and they knew better who, if Joel needed help and Jim needed a kick in the butt. And that's better than a one size fits all government system. And it took care of the poor and needy. And if we had it now when the country is so much richer and you got billionaires competing on how to spend charity money in a way that will make them feel good, they would take care of the poor.
What country would you say is the most libertarian in the world?
Hong Kong, Singapore, despite the government's social repression, economically it's more libertarian. There are a couple think
India?
No.
No? Okay.
Because part of libertarian is rule of law, that if you own something, the government won't just come in and take it from you. And in India, they do that sometimes. There are lists of economically free countries put out by the Fraser Institute and Heritage and Cato. America used to be in the top 5. Now we're about 15, I think. And at the top, every year are Hong Kong, Singapore, Canada's ahead of us, New Zealand, Australia do well, Switzerland.
And those are all much more socialized than the US. Why do you think that there's that weird... Then this is kind of what I come back to, is at least in those countries, people get something for the tax dollars they spend. I've interviewed entrepreneurs, I've talked to them, and they're like, yeah, I'm paying 40-50%, but I feel good about it because I know what I'm getting. I'm getting my public transit. I'm getting better schooling. The schooling in the U.S. is falling behind. Public transit's a joke. Safety, crime. There's just so many things that seem to be rolling the wrong direction in the U.S., and it's a scary future to consider.
I say you're wrong about everything you just said. First of all, it's not getting worse in the United States. Crime has been going down for years. So if you listen to the media, you'd think it was getting worse. Things have been getting better. We're living longer. There are fewer wars in the world. And there's more media, and media tends to cover the bad news because no one's out by the back fence gossiping about who's being faithful to their spouse. It's not news if the planes land safely, but the plane crash is bad news. So we think things are getting worse. And in Switzerland, well, you have Swiss people. You have a very homogeneous group of people. And you have my ancestors with the tradition of hard work and lots of money. They spend more on schooling than America even. Switzerland's first, we're second. They get a lot.
They have a lot, so it makes it easier.
Remember your full question. So
just in terms of the U.S., a lot of the major markers. So if you look at the health longevity, the top 10% versus the bottom 10% in the U.S., there's a 10-year differential. The opioid crisis is actually making long-term life expectancy decrease in the U.S. for something like 3 years in a row. You have not necessarily crime levels increasing, but the U.S. is the only major first world country where you have people, where you have cities that are almost war zones in areas. And that's because people are growing up with the conditions where it's do or die. It's get on the corner and sell drugs, be a rap star, or find your way out through sports, or grab a gun.
Oh, come on, Matt. That's bullshit. Is Atlanta like that where you are?
Parts of Atlanta are. I've had people on. He was the valedictorian of his class. He's from Camden. And he said that the teacher said to him towards the end when they were getting ready to graduate, you're basically going to end up in prison or you're going to end up dead. And I take some of this with a grain of salt, but a lot of it, it's just that we have scarier cities. We have more homeless people. And yet it's the richest country in the world. Why is there such a dichotomy there?
Culture is a lot of it. You have idiot school teachers in Camden. I assume you mean Camden, New Jersey, one of the poorest districts in the country, working for government schools who wrongly tell this kid that he's probably going to go to jail. Because really, any kid in the ghetto who wears a shirt like on a tie is not going to be viewed by police as the enemy. Any kid who attends school, kids who have two parents, they do well. They get out of poverty. And in Switzerland, you have it. In Europe, you have a different culture. People say we spend more on medical care, but we die younger. And I'm mixing so many things. You mentioned the lifespans coming down in America. It's true. There, in the recent years, I don't think it's 3, there was a drop because of white men largely, actually men largely, killing themselves. And a lot of it had to do with the opioid epidemic. So that's a small blip, but the trend has been longer and better lives. And the Europeans live longer and spend less on healthcare, mainly for 3 reasons. They're not obese like many Americans are. They drive less, so they kill each other less on the highways. And they're less likely to shoot each other because we have a culture of guns and more violent murders. That's part of our culture. That's not government rules making that happen.